everybody, and welcome to Heel Heat. This is our TNA show for the week. My name is George Coles, and I'm riding solo, I guess. And we'll get right into it. The first match of the night is a four-way ladder match. For 20 points in the Bound for Glory series, we have Austin Aries versus Frankie Kazarian versus AJ Styles versus Jeffrey Hardy. I thought it was a really good match, really hot opener to the show. We went right into wrestling, no interview, no promo. Always love that. Give us a little switch. I mean, every week doesn't have to start with a 20-minute monologue. Good stuff. Started off the show hot, got the ball rolling, got the creative juices going, got everybody excited for the rest of the show. Frankie Kazarian wins with the assistance of Christopher Daniels and Robert Roode, aka the Extraordinary Gentlemen's Association. I'm wearing ECW, I'm thinking Extreme, sorry. But, really good. Use the Appletini to throw it in the eyes. I'll mention something about that a little bit later when we get into our next subject, actually. But I thought it was a really hot opener. I like the three men taking over the Bound for Glory series. One of the three eventually winning or being one of the last two. Great idea, great little faction. Serves purpose, even though TNA is overrun by factions at this point. Now, speaking of that, our next thing is a promo. We have Main Event Mafia and Dixie Carter come out to talk about Kurt Angle's real-life problems and wishing him luck and success in his rehab. Kudos to them, and kudos for not treating the fans like we're morons, like we didn't know what was about to happen. Aces and Eights come out, basically said, well, you need a fifth man now. That became the running storyline throughout the show. Sting asks Austin Aries, he says no, but we'll get into that a little bit later. What I was talking about in match number one, we had the Appletini getting thrown in somebody's eye. Now, I don't want to jump too far ahead of myself, but that happens again during the show. Twice we have an Appletini throwing. And we also have Gail Kim, in the match versus Gail Kim and Mickie James, we have ODB, who comes out with a flask as part of her gimmick. Now, you have this really touching, heartfelt moment where you're urging the fans to support Kurt Angle in his rehab for alcohol abuse, yet two finishes in the night have an Appletini used as a weapon, and one wrestler uses part of her gimmick is bringing a flask and being drunk, and the announcers even say she's drunk. So, kind of sending a mixed message out there, TNA. It's you're either all in on the drinking or you want to support Kurt. I mean, the Appletini is easily lost from Christopher Daniels' gimmick and doesn't hurt him at all. Same thing with ODB. She's a fantastic worker. She doesn't need to be the drunk ODB. Now, Cowboy James Storm, it is ingrained in his gimmick so much, and so much of it is used as his special weapon, a la Triple H with the sledgehammer. Plenty of wrestlers have their special weapons. Shane Douglas used a chain, and the beer bottle seems to be his special weapon. I can understand if they kept James Storm with it, but ODB doesn't need the crutch. James Storm really doesn't need the crutch, but it's part of his main event, his character. Christopher Daniels, very simple to take it off from him. That guy, you could say this week, hey, we want you to be Curry Man again, and he's going to make it work. He's just that good. But that was the main problem I wanted to talk about. Is you're kind of sending mixed signals out there to us fans. Either support Kurt and don't have a kind of a hostile work environment, if you ask me. If you got all these people drinking around him, chances are he's going to drink more when he comes back. I'm just saying. Knowing some addicts and former addicts, and it is what it is. Speaking of that, going into right into the match, sorry I derailed a little bit there, guys. We had ODB with her flask versus Mickie James and Gail Kim. I absolutely love the fact that they're working out ODB back into the division instead of just being a referee. She is way more talented and way better than that. I enjoy the fact that she won. I enjoy the fact that hopefully she's going to get a world title or a knockouts title opportunity somewhere down the line. I hope to see her win it, actually, because I do like ODB. I think she's different. She's not your cookie cutter diva. She's not your fitness model. She's a real woman, and she's a very attractive, normal woman. I mean, she's got curves. She's got a different look to her. Nothing wrong with ODB. I mean, this is the girl, you know, she's different, and it makes you stand up and take notice. Not that Gail Kim's bad. Mickie James, I think, is resting on her name at this point, but Gail Kim is probably the best women's wrestler of the last 20 years. Probably have to go back to Sherry Martel to find one that would be better than her. Or even Tara. Tara, I'll put her in that category as well. But Gail Kim is an amazing athlete, amazing wrestler. ODB right along those lines. I love her. I love her gimmick. I love the trailer trash. I love the different look. I love that it's so different that you immediately know who she is. And that's what sells it to me. And coming off of that, speaking as we did earlier, Main Event Mafia is trying to recruit a fifth member. Now the caveat is that the fifth member has to join the group knowing full well that they have a chance of losing their TNA contract. So you have Rampage and Samoa Joe come to the ring to recruit Tito Ortiz, which brings out Bully Ray. Bully runs down Tito. We don't really get an answer from him, and it serves to push along the storylines a little bit later. Now, we're going to take a little break from the show and go to our question of the week. The question I had was one that I stole from my friend Mass Tweeter X and the IWX Show, IWXshow.com. Great podcast. They're on a little bit of a break. We'll come back September 10th. Some amazing guests are lined up. He's had some amazing guests. Go check it out. Look in the archives. I mean, you got guys like Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant, Tito Santana, Axel Rotten. The list goes on and on. Buff Bagwell, J.J. Dillon. Some really great guests. Caleb Conley, one of the great rising stars of the independent scene. The show with Freight Train from $5 Wrestling is an absolute must listen to. But anyway, going into our question of the week, which we stole from him. That's why we went into the 30 seconds of plug time. Who would you build TNA wrestling around? And we have some answer from our friends. The first one is from our friend Handsome Pat Fannin. He says, Kaz, Daniels, Roode, AA should be the center of the show for the next few years. Very good answer. The next is from our friend Metal Ruler 45. Aries is the guy to build TNA around. His mic skills and wrestling ability are second to none. So we got two guys mentioning Aries in there. I said when I was part of the IWX show roundtable questioning, I said that Bobby Roode would be the guy, and I stick by that. Bobby Roode is the guy at this point. He is your most complete champion. He looks like a champion. He wrestles like a champion. He carries the belt as good, if not better, than anybody else. Some other good options. I'd say Bobby Roode would be my number one option, and some other good ones would be Magnus, Samoa Joe, the guys that they've mentioned, Aries, Daniels, Kazarian. I mean, I would do, like, if you guys are familiar with the SmackDown 6 that Paul Heyman did when he ran SmackDown, he basically said, we got 6 guys, and we're going to build the company around. That was Rey Mysterio, Edge, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, I want to say Brock Lesnar, and Kurt Angle. And that was the 6 guys he built all the storylines around. I would do something akin to that. The 4 guys that they mentioned, Daniels, Kaz, Aries, Roode, I would do them. And I would add in Magnus and Joe, or maybe even Magnus and Storm. You know, I think Joe, his character has been damaged very badly by TNA in the past few years, and he just doesn't have. You'd have to build him up before he's going to be believable again as the monster he once was and they destroyed, in my opinion. But I love Joe. I'm a very big Samoa Joe fan. It's not a knock on him. It's a knock on the way that he's been portrayed over the last 3+ years. Basically since Hulk Hogan's been there. And his cronies. And coming off of that, our question of the week for this week is, and I know it's a little bit of a controversial one, most people do not like the MMA guys coming in. We have 3 MMA guys somewhat associated with TNA wrestling. We have Quentin Rampage Jackson, Tito Ortiz, and King Mo. Out of the 3 guys, who do you see making the biggest impact? Basically, in 2 years, when you look back on their run, who's going to actually impact wrestling? Is it going to be Rampage Jackson, Tito Ortiz, or King Mo? Let us know what you think. Hit us up on our Facebook, hit us up on Twitter, put it down where? Down there in the comments. Right down there, there's a little area, you put it in a little box, type it up. We'll mention you on the next show if you do. And next we, going right back into the wrestling, we had an awesome tables match. Mr. Anderson versus Magnus versus Samoa Joe versus Bobby Roode. For the best TNA has to offer. Going back to the question I just said, these are 4 guys that I would put in the main events. And these are 4 guys that put out there, they did a really good job. Tables match is kind of boring. A little bit of the unpredictability is good. To me, there are certain people that pull off a tables match really well. Team 3D is one of them. A guy like Jeff Hardy, he's great in gimmick matches, including this. John Cena, believe it or not, is actually really good in tables matches. He sells it well. It's just not my favorite style match. I'm sorry. It's kind of in that area of like a bull rope match to me. It's just, there are some great ones, but for the overall there are some bad ones. This one was good. I wouldn't put it in the great category. It was serviceable. Bobby Roode picks up the win. I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. Christopher Daniels again uses the Appletini as a weapon to help Bobby Roode win. I really like the story where they're going with this with Roode, Daniels, and Kazarian. I like the fact that they're trying to take over Bound for Glory. I like this storyline. It's really good and it's really interesting. Hopefully it gets pushed more to the forefront as the weeks go by. Now, speaking of being pushed to the forefront, we have a rematch, this time in a steel cage. Chris Sabin defends his TNA World Heavyweight Championship against Bully Ray, with the caveat, if Bully Ray loses, he never gets to wrestle for the championship again, a la Sting when Sting lost to Bully Ray. Thought this was a solid match. I thought it was a little bit predictable, to be honest with you. I never really seen, and you could go back and watch, I never seen Chris Sabin as a viable champion going forward. I seen him as a good transitional, kind of a, we're giving you this out of respect of what you've done champion, not a, you're a champion we want to build around champion, if you know what I mean. The belt goes back to Bully Ray after Tito Ortiz interferes on the side of Aces and Eights, which was kind of the swerve that was coming. My friend Bob Delph, at Bob _ Delph on Twitter, goes by Bunkhouse Bob. I'm sorry, Bob, I didn't mean to. Anyway, use both. Use your real name and your gimmick name, so I'm not trying to break gimmick for you. He mentioned this on Twitter about 40 minutes before it happened, but he was thinking Tito would join them and turn on them next week in the 5-on-5 match, but Tito turns on him this week. A week early, but Bob still had it right. I thought it was decent. I think it was right to put the belt back on Bully. Chris Sabin got his, basically his ceremonial title run. He could always put on his resume he was a world champion at this point. Nothing wrong with that. Tommy Rich still gets to put on his resume that he was an NWA world champion back when being the NWA World Champion meant a lot. And, you know, he only held it for 8 days. Chris Sabin held it I think a little bit under a month, maybe more. I might be wrong on this, guys. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I thought he was a transitional. It builds up the stats for Bully Ray, builds up the stats for Sabin. Sabin can say he's a former tag champion, world champion, TNA champion. You know, Bully Ray can say he's a former two-time, or he's a two-time world champion at this point, which sounds more impressive than one time, even though one time is impressive. But I thought it was a good way to end his run. I never thought Chris Sabin was the guy to go forward with. I respect him, and I respect the fact that he did deserve to get a run. It was kind of like kind of like when you have the Hall of Fame, or not the Hall of Fame, the All-Star game in baseball, where a guy that's been good for a lot of years still gets in the All-Star game because of what he has done, not what he's currently doing. Kind of how I feel about Chris Sabin. I don't think he has the mic skill to carry the company as their world champion, but he has an in-ring talent that's as good or better than anybody else in wrestling. But basically, that's what we had show-wise. Now, I'm really shocked because we're going to go for the 3rd week in a row. The Hulk Hogan Thunder Lips count is 0. Starting to scare me. Maybe with the recent firing of his daughter Brooke Hogan, maybe Hulk Hogan is being pushed out the door as well, guys. A lot of people say that that's what's going to save TNA. There are some rumors. Very reliable source and friend of mine, who I'm not going to name because for reasons of him being a source, and I'm not going to, he didn't actually spell out what was going to happen, but he said a few weeks back that we're going to see some real changes in TNA on the inside side, the management side, not the wrestling side. But the people that are in charge of the company, we're going to start seeing some real changes. Is Hulk Hogan not being on the show, is that foretelling the future that he's going to be gone for good? The fact that Brooke Hogan is now fired, is that a precursor to Hulk being gone? Who knows? Very interesting. Keeps you interested, keeps you tuned in. Hopefully, and it's no knock on Hulk Hogan and everything he's done for wrestling, but he brings nothing to the table here. I actually think he needs to go. I think Eric Bischoff needs to go with him. Their views and their way of telling wrestling stories is outdated and overrated at this point. They struck lightning in a bottle once. They've tried to recreate it ever since and haven't. But basically, that's all I have to say for the show. We're going to go right into our ratings. Now, if you watch the show, we do a 1 to 5 scale on the ratings. 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. A 5 is a Bobby Roode, a 4 is a Christopher Daniels, 3 is a James Storm, 2 is a Garrett Bischoff, 1's a Jesse Goddard, and I'm going to go ahead and give this a 3, a James Storm, a very middle of the road show. The 2 gimmick matches were good. The ladder match was fantastic. The tables match was good. Bully Ray versus Chris Sabin, I don't know, something about him just doesn't click well in the ring. The segments with Rampage Tito and Samoa Joe, a little bit bad. Basically, Tito's not a good promo cutter, wrestling-wise at this point. The main event Mafia Dixie Carter thing, good, but wrestling show, it didn't move the ratings, didn't move me. It gave me, it was good, but it is what it is. I think this is a very middle of the road show, a little bit up from last week when I thought it was a 2 show. This is a 3. It's a James Storm. Getting a little bit better. Hopefully, like I said, the changes that are rumored to be coming happen quickly so we can get our good wrestling alternative to WWE back. But basically, that's all I have to say for this show. My name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of Heel Heat.